Okay, Mike, you want to come on up, and we're going to learn all about stormwater and green infrastructure, because the question about this is going to come back. We were told before that this is not something that was going to go away, but was going to come back around the June-July time frame, so we can get a little bit of education. So, Mike, come on down here. I'll put your presentation up for you.
Appreciate it. Is this on? Thanks, everybody. They tell the actors never get on stage with animals or kids because you'll get upstaged, and following firefighters is certainly not something I'd hoped to do today. Although, when I saw the agenda, I added something to my bio slide that I'll show you in a second. Control L. There you go. So the title of my talk tonight is Catching Stormwater for Fun and Profit, What We Know and What We Need to Sustain and Grow. I'm the research manager at the Council for Watershed Health. We're a nonprofit. Our offices are downtown. I am also a PhD student at UCLA Geography. I'm in my third year, hopefully of 5. I will work really hard to not sound like a grad student tonight. There's a few spots I know where I'll slip, and I'll warn you when it's happening and hopefully explain what I'm talking about. I also belong to the Water Resources Group at the UCLA's Institute of Environment and Sustainability, and I'm on the advisory board of the Center for Geographic Studies at Cal State Northridge, which is where I got my master's degree in geography. I also lectured at Cal State Northridge for a number of years. And this is the part I threw on when I saw the agenda, seeing that I was following firefighters. I used to be one myself. When I first came out to California in 2000, I went through the police academy training at Rio Hondo. And I was a dispatcher for police and fire back in Alexandria, and I was a volunteer firefighter back in my college days in Ithaca. I changed directions back in 2002, and now I'm in water resources. So that's my little nod to the guys that were here ahead of me. So the Council for Watershed Health, just to tell you a little bit about our organization, I don't know if anyone here has heard of us. We used to have a different name, the Los Angeles and San Gabriel Rivers Watershed Council. We were founded by Dorothy Green, who also founded Heal the Bay, which is another well-known nonprofit in the region. We see ourselves as the region hub for watershed research and analysis. We're really interested in helping put good information in the hands of decision makers at that intersection between policy and science. Nowadays, more and more, our policymakers are asked to make decisions that are related to scientific information. And having that communication be a strong one is something that's really important to us and to other organizations like ours. And we've always been about connecting diverse perspectives. We look to get everyone together at the table to talk out these issues. As it sounds like you know, water resources management in Southern California has traditionally been isolated, one group from the other. Sanitation rarely talks to water supply, rarely talks to flood control. And this is a paradigm, grad school. This is a state of affairs that we're looking to try to change, and we've been working on for about 15 years now. So our mission here, lots of big words, facilitate an inclusive consensus process. We're looking to make sure that we have everybody at the table when we're making these decisions about water so that the decisions can be made as a group with everyone there knowing what we're deciding about. We have a vision for 2025, which our board holds, that by then we'll have a sustainable Southern California where we're managing these watershed at a watershed scale for economic vitality and both social and environmental health. For us, those three things have to come together. You can't solve one without solving all of them. And we do all sorts of different work. We work on watershed assessments, so we're looking to see how the system is based on how we want it to be. We're helping at the intersection of policy and science, as I said. We work a lot with the integrated regional water management groups. We have demonstration projects that I'm going to show you a little bit of tonight. We run symposia and conference and seminars where people can learn about native landscaping or how to maintain an oak tree. You know, the oak trees are important species around here that a lot of people don't know how to handle. So we do all sorts of neat trainings like that. So when I was asked to come tonight, I wanted to sort of go back to basics. And I imagine, again, from the talk that I heard earlier, this group has a strong knowledge of how water works around here. But just to refresh, we know where our water comes from, and for the most part, it's from the Sierra Nevada mountains and the Colorado River basin. Now, when I say we, I'm talking about Southern California in general, and I learned a lot about you guys prepping for this presentation. I haven't spent a lot of time north of the San Gabriels thinking about what happens up here before, but I know you have a strong reliance on groundwater up here, which is commendable. It has its own challenges, clearly, but it is something that's important to recognize. You do also use a lot of imported water, but your balance up here is very similar to the San Gabriel Valley. It's not as much similar to the city of LA. So those are the three main water supply sources. When we talk about the city of LA, they also have the Owens Valley and Mono Lake Aqueduct, which I didn't include on the words here, but it is in the picture. There's stress on all of these systems, right? We have stress in the way we manage our water that's changing. Our understanding of the impact our management systems have on the environment is one thing that's changing. Our understanding of water quality, the needs to change the way we deal with water is changing. So the management side is changing a lot through legislation, through judicial action, through just education, as we all learn. And then the climate is changing too. So the way that we get water from this system that we've come to rely on is going to have to change as well. Some more things we know. Urban stormwater runoff. So we're talking about the water that lands on something we built, whether it's a building or a road or a parking lot, that then runs off of that and travels off into the system of storm drains and rivers and streams. We know that that's a resource we're not using, right? In the times before we had built anything, that water would hit dirt or plants, and more of it would end up in the groundwater basin than does today. That's the first piece. And the second piece is we know for sure that urban runoff is a cause of pollution in our waterways and in the ocean. And this is certainly the LA River, certainly the San Gabriel River, but the Santa Clara River as well. Cayugas, Malibu, all of these streams that enter to the ocean that drain any urban surface carry pollutants. And it could be big stuff like trash, dirty diapers, right? It could be, and it's little stuff too, pieces of metal, dissolved things that we can't see. And what we've also know is that when we go to confront these two challenges, right, one, we're not using that resource very well, and two, it causes problems not being used. It provides for a locally controlled resource, and you know, right, you use a lot of groundwater up here. You know how valuable it is to have control of your own supply. And if we are able to augment that groundwater with additional stormwater capture, more of that rain in the ground means more locally controlled supply. The kinds of projects that I'll be talking about tonight that does this, that captures that stormwater, that handles water pollution, it also enhances our neighborhoods, it enhances our recreational spaces, it enhances our habitats. We also know that this creates jobs and speeds the economy, and there's a really neat report that isn't us. We were involved as an advisor on it that I'm going to share with you tonight that has some great numbers about those last 2 points. So at the organization where I work, the council, how we know this stuff, we have a pretty good resume that leads us towards an understanding of water supply augmentation, using rain as a resource, and the questions of water quality. So this is just a list of some of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute, but we handle monitoring for 2 of the watersheds, the LA and the San Gabriel watersheds. These are programs for the sanitation district on the San Gabriel and for the city of LA and city of Burbank on the LA. We've also been in talks with sanitation. They have on the books a plan to do the whole Santa Clara as well. That project is still in development. And we've also been working for the last 13 years on the water augmentation study, which is a project to understand how we use stormwater better. And then there's a bunch of sub-projects which we'll talk about as we move forward. So I've mentioned green infrastructure a few times, and I don't know if this is something that you all know. And green infrastructure, the slide we have up here, the green text is what the US EPA calls it. So it's the idea of using vegetation, soils, and natural processes to manage water and create healthier urban environments. So it's taking the things that our old infrastructure, that we call gray infrastructure, used to do, and trying to do it with green infrastructure instead. Instead of using concrete to run that water out to the ocean, let's use plants and soils to get it into the ground instead. And that's really what green infrastructure does. And again, there's a whole list of things here that it can, what we often talk about is the multiple benefits that come from green infrastructure. And this list here is, these slides will all be online, so I'm not going to read the list, but you'll see them come up again as we move forward. So the watershed monitoring projects, these are 2 efforts, one in each watershed. It's based on the permits that the water treatment plants have to discharge their water after they're done cleaning it into the rivers. So they hold permits that are based off of the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act. And these permits require them to monitor the condition of the water that comes out of those plants. And it was discovered a while back now, about 8 years ago, that they were doing all this duplicative monitoring. So there would be days when 3 different labs would show up at a bridge in 3 different trucks and capture 3 different samples essentially say like, hey, Bob, hi, Frank, and they'd catch samples, run them off to different labs, and essentially get the same results. And a regional group of stakeholders, including us and the regional board, the regulators and the permittees all got together and said, let's do something different. So they cut down a lot of that duplication, and with the savings that accrued, they moved that monitoring from just at the outfall, just that spot where the water comes out, to the whole watershed. So let's think about the whole system and what our impacts on it are. And these are the questions that drive the monitoring. So the monitoring is helping us understand these questions. So what is the health of the streams? How are the conditions of the streams changing or staying the same? The middle one there is just, are the discharges meeting their requirements? But then the last two are the really interesting ones. Is it safe to fish? Can we eat the fish we catch in our waters? And is it safe to swim? Can you safely get in the water here and swim? And both of these programs are trying to answer those questions. The water augmentation study, this started in 2000, and this was really one of the things that the council started as an organization to accomplish. It started in 2000, and it was multiple partners. The next slide shows you who they are. And it really was seeking to answer this one question, that can we safely and effectively infiltrate urban stormwater to augment our groundwater? In 2000, we did not know that. We had a sense that it was dirty water. We didn't know what would happen if we put it in the ground. Would we carry all those pollutants down into the groundwater that we relied upon? Nobody really knew the answer. There have been some studies back east, but our system is so different that it needed to get done here. And this slide is kind of a noise of words, but the point I'm hoping you take away from this is that there are many people involved, lots of the big organizations, whether it's federal organizations like Bureau of Reclamation and the EPA, county is involved, the cities are involved, everyone, the regulators are there, MWD is there. This is a partnership of many of the important water managers all together thinking about how we do this better, use our urban water. So the first thing we did is we installed 6 of these green infrastructure systems that would capture rain and get it in the ground. And we monitored at them. We took water samples at the surface before it entered the system. We monitored the water in the soil just below the infiltration, just below the system, and then the water in the groundwater deep below. And in most of these cases, the groundwater was anywhere between 30 and 300 feet below the infrastructure we put in. And in every case, there was no connection between the surface water quality and the groundwater quality. That what we discovered is that in all of the things that we looked at, and there was 600 some odd connections that we looked at, none of the things that are in urban stormwater make it to the groundwater. There's action in the soils and in the plants that remove all of it. Whether it's the oils being eaten by microbes, the metals getting retained by the roots of plants, in every case there's something that cleans it out. Actually, in some cases, we found that adding stormwater to the groundwater improved its quality. So we had groundwater that was slightly degraded by nitrates or salts. And stormwater has those things in such a low level that you add it in, it actually benefits you. So we came from that project and we did the Elmer Avenue neighborhood retrofit. And the slide you're looking at here has what the street looked like on the left in 2005 and what it looked like on the right in 2010. And through the magic of Photoshop, one of our people put this together. There's a blend there in the middle of the picture. And this is a street in Sun Valley, right near the Burbank Airport. It's in the city of Los Angeles, that was the natural outlet for all the flow from 40 acres of residential land. So this place was flooded whenever it rained, even a little bit. On a heavy storm or a 2-day storm, these families couldn't let their kids go to school. There was so much water in their street. And this is right in the middle of the LA grid. It's not something that you would imagine would be there. And the soils here are perfect for infiltration. If you could get the water from the concrete, from this asphalt, into the dirt, that gets you right into one of the groundwater basins we rely on. It's really high effective soils. So this project demonstrated this green infrastructure, and it continues to be a laboratory for us. It's been in place now since 2010. We recently added a section. This is to the south of the street. This is a gap between houses. There's 4 houses on either side of these green walls here. And the gap was left there to let the water out of the neighborhood. So they knew this was a problem way back when. They built it this way. And because of the street that we put in that's capturing so much water and putting it in the ground, we were able to come to this paseo, as we're calling it. It was a non-vehicular alley, and put in this system here, which is capturing even more water and getting even more in the ground. So it becomes a green infrastructure project that captures stormwater, it cleans stormwater, it's a new green space for a community. Right, it brought jobs to the region. So Water Replenishment District is a joint powers authority that's responsible for the groundwater in two of the coastal groundwater basins, the Central and the West Coast. And they bring in a lot of recycled water to replenish the basins. A bunch of people have the rights to pump out water. WRD brings water in usually from the Colorado River or the State Water Project, and puts it in the ground so that they can get pumped out next year. And they want to get off that imported water. So they're looking both at recycled water and they're looking at stormwater. So they asked us to help them think about where in their service area they could capture stormwater. So the objectives of this study were to understand to develop a prioritized list of locations. So where could they go to do these projects? Show them what one of these projects would look like, and then figure out whether it's cost effective for them to do so. So these start being complex maps. I hope you can work with me. The yellow is the WRD service area. The areas that are not yellow but have red boundaries, these are urban catchments. So these are areas that are defined usually by storm drains or curbs. And these are catchments all about 200 acres that are high priority, that are opportunity locations for to do stormwater. So we then dropped a whole bunch of points. These are all the spots where we probably don't want to do stormwater capture right away. It's either a place that used to have a filling station, so it has legacy pollutants in the soils. Someone has a permit to pump water out of their basement, or there's a Superfund site. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to do stormwater there right away. All of these are surmountable challenges. It's just a matter of you don't want to do these first. These are not the highest priority ones. And that left us with these 17 catchments to think about. So we went out and looked at them, trying to find a spot where we could draw this idea of what a distributed system would look like. That took us down to these 6 pilots, and then it took us down to these 2 catchments. These are right up to the east of the 110 between USC campus and downtown, right along Broadway. I don't know if anybody knows that area. So this is an area that, the reason why we picked it is that we discovered the City of Los Angeles Bureau of Sanitation, who's responsible for stormwater quality, had long had their eyes on this location because they knew it was a problem for them. They knew that they were getting a lot of stormwater pollutants coming off of this section of the city. And they looked at it and said, we need to do something there someday. And then along we come with a water quantity agency, somebody who wants that water. And suddenly we've got some synergy. Let's do it. So this is a zoom in now on the northern of those two catchments. And this is the pilot concept that we created. We call it a distributed system of systems. So on the right-hand side is the zoom in. You see the blue areas with the little blue dots. Those are residential areas, both single-family and multifamily. And we're suggesting about 40% of them will do something with some incentive. They'll do a rain garden or a rain barrel. They'll help capture some rain. Then the residential street at the moment drains on the surface out towards Broadway, which is that orange stuff. We'll put something at the corner there to capture some more of the water. Not all of it, but some more of it. And then on the commercial street, we'll add a little bit more to capture some. And then down in that red box to the bottom, we'll put a big system somewhere underneath the parking lot to capture the rest of it. So that's what these things look like, these 4 BMPs. You'll hear people in my field talk about BMPs all the time. Those are best management practices, which have become a noun, and it refers to infrastructure. I don't know why. It happened before I was around, so it just is. The residential property, again, bioswales, a way to capture the rain on their property and get it in the ground. The residential street has some sort of system below it where the water enters a catch basin that looks like a normal catch basin, but rather than being connected to the river, it's connected to the groundwater basin, just like we have at Elmer. The commercial street gets, and here the commercial streets, it's called Broadway, and it really is a Broadway. It is a parking lane, 2 driving lanes, a turn lane, 2 driving lanes, a parking lane. And then the sidewalks, I think, are 26 or 28-foot sidewalks. So we have a huge tapestry to work with here. So we'll do some sort of bioswale or planted area in the sidewalk that can capture more water coming off the residential, commercial area. And then down under the parking lot, you put something that looks like gray infrastructure. It's a big system. You pull the parking lot up, you dig a big hole, you put a system down there that can hold a lot of water and has an open bottom, and then you put the parking lot back. Now we talk about this, and this is one of the spots where I start sounding a little bit like a grad student, so I apologize. But the way I sell this is an idea of phased implementation, where what we want to do is we say, let's design this whole catchment. What would it look like to have this whole catchment set up this way with distributed systems that's capturing rain, that's cleaning the water, that's got green? What would it look like to do the whole system? We size everything as if the whole system were there, but that any one piece could survive by itself. Once you have the plan, then you start implementing in an opportunistic way. If you get a grant from the state to do a big piece of infrastructure, you pull up the parking lot and you do it. If you get a foundation who wants to put some money into rain barrels, you do that. And you slowly work on building the system. It took us 120 years to get the system we have today. It's going to take us a long time to change that system out for the new one. Why not plan the whole thing? Why not do it all according to a plan instead of sort of the hodgepodge that we had to get where we are today? So there's what it looks like. These slides kind of animate a little bit. So there's the catchment, and here's that design, the pilot design, and then we put it in. And this then becomes a stamp. We can use it as a stamp to stamp our way across the city doing this work. So we use the same plan in a different spot when more money comes along, and we add some more, 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 and maybe 60 years, maybe 80 years, maybe 20 years if we get lucky, we've changed the whole system out, and we've got a distributed system that brings all of these multiple benefits, replacing that old one. So when we do the feasibility study summary, we have big water, right? Those 49 catchments that we identified have the potential to capture, using those systems, about 17,000 acre-feet a year, which is big numbers. Even the 4,300, which is in that smaller number, the 17 high-priority catchments, that 4,300 would be sufficient for WRID to stop buying imported water. That's enough. Now, it's a big lift to get there, to do that fully distributed system. We recognize that. But the potential is there. The other conclusion we came to is that these projects are too expensive for a water supply agency to do all by themselves. But if you remember the way this story started, we picked this spot because there was a sanitation department interested in doing something there too. So now we have two agencies who are both going to benefit from one project, and we start talking about how we leverage these things together. So green infrastructure versus gray infrastructure, there's some interesting things to talk about here. Gray infrastructure, we normally think about it as single purpose. It is flood control, or it is water quality. It's one thing. That's how we used to build it. We had one agency build one thing. It's managed by one agency. It's maintained by one agency. It's funded through one agency's budget. The other thing about gray infrastructure is whenever we go to build a new piece, we're leveraging 100 years of investment in the stuff we've got already. So we think about gray infrastructure as being cheaper than green infrastructure. It's cheaper because we're tying into a system that exists, that has all this investment already tied into it. And we don't normally talk about that pre-existing investment. Green infrastructure, on the other hand, becomes multi-purpose. It solves multiple problems at one time. It's managed by multiple agencies. It's maintained by multiple agencies, sometimes not even agencies themselves, right? If you have a rain barrel in your yard, that's yours to maintain and benefit from. And this is the other spot where I sound horribly like a grad student. I apologize. Green infrastructure internalizes historic externalities. I'll explain what this means. It raises the apparent costs. So right now, gray infrastructure takes our stormwater and runs it out to the bay. People then go surfing in the bay. They step on a rock, they cut their toe, they get an infection, they go to the hospital, right? They don't have insurance, we all help pay for it. That cost is because of the gray infrastructure, right? We don't normally connect those dots. Green infrastructure, on the other hand, when we put it in, captures those costs that happen out there in the ocean to the surfer's toe and drags it back up into the project. So the project becomes more expensive, but you're capturing costs that are currently outside of the way we think about infrastructure. So it's a change in our philosophy in the way we calculate and consider cost. And this is a repeat of the earlier slide. Just to refresh, right? Green infrastructure, we're using vegetation, soils, and natural processes, the infiltration through soil, for instance, to do this cleaning, to manage our water. So there's this other great report, and I thought this crowd would appreciate it. It's still in draft status, and it should be ready, I hope, in the next month or two. We got a grant from the EPA to have some consultants work on this for us. And what we asked them was, we said, can you go look at a bunch of the regulatory and legislative drivers that are impacting our cities right now and think about how green infrastructure can help them? And so they looked at AB 32, SB 375, the two state climate acts. They looked at the Water Conservation Act from 2009, the Water Efficient Landscaping Ordinance, the municipal stormwater permits for the LA region, and then a whole bunch of other regional drivers like the Irwin Plan and the Basin Plan, TMDL plans. Some of these I think this crowd probably is familiar with. There's a lot of plans. And what this report is showing is that these green infrastructure projects, not only do they serve the multiple benefits of stormwater quality, stormwater quantity, green space, jobs. Not only do that, but they can check a lot of boxes if you're a city trying to respond to these drivers. They can help you with your climate change adaptation. They can help you with your sustainable landscape ordinances. They can help you with your water reduction requirements. So they can really help with a lot of different things. And this is where I get to the gravy, which is not even mine, right? I just poured it on here at the end from another organization. So the Economic Roundtable is a nonprofit down in LA that did a report. They studied $1.2 billion of water project investments that have happened here in the region over the last number of years. And these are projects that dealt with stormwater, with water conservation, water treatment, so these are the treatment plants, groundwater management and remediation projects, so cleaning the groundwater, and recycled water projects. So these are a whole suite of different projects. And what they found was, of that $1.2 billion invested, we got $2.4 billion in economic activity, and we had 16,000 person years of employment based on that $1.2 million. So the next slide is really the shining star of all of this. For every $1 million, the report shows that for every $1 million spent on a water project, we stimulate between $1.9 and $2 million of total sales. So that's the million of the project and another million of downstream, pun entirely intended, economic activity, where the people working on the project go out and buy Subway, or they pay their rent, or whatever. It also creates, and these are permanent created jobs, between 12 and 16 permanent jobs for the economy in the green industry, the green economy that we all talk about wanting to form. And of these jobs, the wages are ranged between $33,000 and $52,000 a year. And in the way that economists think about these things, that performance exceeds that of the motion picture and video production category of jobs and the housing construction jobs, right? So these are two that our region has historically pointed to as driving forces of our economy. And these water jobs here are shown to outperform those as far as their economic impact. So this is a really interesting report. It's available. I think we have a link through our website to it and a bunch of the other reports that I've shown you today. So just to summarize some of the things that I talked about, water is critical, clearly, to our social, economic, and ecosystem health, right? We are a community, we are a healthy community because of our water resources. And when the climate starts changing for us, the place we're going to feel it first is our water. That's where we're going to need to adapt. Urban stormwater runoff, it's an underutilized resource. In the LA area, so south of here, in the LA area, we have numbers that show pre-development, the landscape captured about 95% of all rain that fell on it would end up in the soils, in the plants, or in the ground. Now it's only about 50%, right? So we built, and now we send a whole bunch more water to the ocean than we used to. All that water we do send to the ocean causes a lot of damage. It causes impact to human health, and it causes damage to the environment that we rely on. And this is where I touch most closely on the issue of the stormwater fee. The water quality mitigation that's before us, that's regulated by the U.S. EPA and the state boards based on the Clean Water Act, that regulated requirement, it stands before us. It's not going to go away, and it's going to be expensive. But it can be leveraged to provide multiple benefits. It doesn't have to just be water quality that we fix. It can be water quality, it can be water quantity, it can be our economy, it can be our green space, it can be our habitats. Using green infrastructure and doing strong integrated planning between the agencies that have authority over such things is really the critical step that we should be pushing to make sure happens. As they ask us to spend new money to do things that need to happen, we need to make sure they do it smart. Water projects are clearly investments. They have a really strong rate of return for our economy and for our region. And I thank you for inviting us and for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions in any time I have left.
I'm curious what your organization has to do with the Clean Rivers and Beaches Act, which is trying to pass another law that would charge us twice for capturing our own stormwater runoff here in Santa Clarita, because we already capture our stormwater runoff. That's one thing that I wanted to ask. And then also, some of the things that you propose are wonderful, but they would require some changes in how cities and municipalities do their business, because for instance, if we could water our vegetable patch with our washing machine discharge water, that would be another way of recapturing our own water. And also, if they allowed more permeable surfaces for driveways and walkways, that would also help some of the water percolate into our ground system. So your thoughts, please.
So the idea of these changes that happen at the city level is something that's we're working on. The Elmer Avenue project, which I showed you, one of the outcomes from that project is that the city of Los Angeles created what are called standard plans for the systems we installed. So prior to Elmer Avenue being in place, if somebody wanted to come up and do a permeable parking spot in their front yard, or they wanted to do a bioswale in the right-of-way between the sidewalk and the street, they would have to pay exorbitant fees and go through all these extra hoops. But once those systems were installed at Elmer, the city adopted standard plans. So one of the things that we're working on in that report I mentioned that's to help the cities think about how green infrastructure can benefit them, one of the pieces that's in there I didn't mention is a codes and ordinances checklist for a city to think about. So they can take that tool and look at their codes and ordinances and try to find spots where their rules are preventing people from doing these smart, now pretty well understood solutions like you're talking about. So that tool is something that will be available soon. So if you reach out to me probably in August, I'll be able to provide you a copy of that report, and you can drop it right at your city's doorstep and see what they're interested in doing.
Yes, the lady's right that the federal NPDES program mandated this city to take care of the stormwater as it leaves our roads and streets and surfaces into our river. So we do not wish to pay twice. Now, LA County is promoting that we're going to have the same program on top of the one we already have. Somebody's got to work together, and the LA County go look elsewhere because we're already doing it. We shouldn't be paying for it twice. I find it interesting that you are well aware that this nation's economy is built on housing starts. And you're saying this water exceeds that in the yield, the return of the yield to our economy. Are we doing anything about educating our senators and even all the way down to our local planners that it isn't build, 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 and don't worry about the water and whether the streets carry the traffic or whatever? Is anything being done to get the planners to understand that don't just keep building what's creating a problem with the water, but maybe slow the building down and put some of the funding into the water and get us these great things that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I was really happy to have this invitation is that up in this part of the county isn't somewhere where we've done a lot of work yet, and that's a legacy of our old geographic understanding. We used to be a nonprofit that worked in those two rivers. So being able to come up here and talk to the audience up here and start to relay some of the lessons that we've learned down there, the communication between all those different sectors is something that is strengthening. Places like LA, which has a lot of resources, they're out in front clearly because they have the luxury, right? We know a lot of the cities, we work with the San Gabriel cities a lot, and down in the Gateway, where usually the planner is a person all by themselves. They don't have a lot of resources, they're already overworked. So there are a lot of challenges still for the smaller cities of the region, but that sort of talk between the water agencies, if you will, and the planning side is something that is building. It's just a matter of getting it built everywhere.
There are a couple things. Some of the regulations that have come down from the regional water board that are people are worried about costing so much money, which they do. But part of those regulations also require local municipalities to pass ordinances to make these things easier to do. And we have worked with some cities like Long Beach as they have adopted these ordinances, and we've helped train their city staff on how they work. I think I don't really know what Santa Clarita's laws are like. I'm guessing because you asked the question, and this lady was nodding her head, that there are some restrictions on things that you can do. Well, Santa Clarita is going to have to, because of the permit, they're going to have to pass what are called low-impact development ordinances. And the way that these usually work is they'll come up with kind of some standard plans that make it very easy, and they fast track you through the permitting process and all kinds of things. So I think you're going to see that particular problem change pretty soon.
I have a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, my husband and I were privileged to know Dorothy Green, a beautiful, engaging person who was very dedicated, and I'm sorry when she died.
Yeah, I only was able to meet her once towards the end of her life. I started in 2008, so.
Yeah, she's really...
Even then, she was amazing, and this was right towards the end of her life. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, I like the projects where you do try and save water. It should not go out to the ocean, and we should be using it. We felt that way all along. And these projects where they are putting in, like the tiles that the water can go down in there, in the ground, and save some of our water, this is a great thing. And I know these different water agencies who have gotten involved in trying to save water are doing some great things. The San Gabriel group, I understand a lot of what they've been doing. But what I have a problem with is our water goes west. Okay, now they're going to ask us to pay extra money for trying to clean up the water that's going east, okay, to the ocean, to that part of the ocean, Los Angeles. So now and ours is actually going out Ventura way. That is our direction. But since we already have a charge from our city, if we are going to get hit with something like this, they should be considering what we've already been committed to. We shouldn't be paying the full amount. Now, these other cities, I'm sure they're not probably as burdened as we are right now. It would be a burden if you do put that large charge on us. So I think that that should be a consideration. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Antos. I really like the fact that you're looking at incremental changes that can happen if you can't do the big stuff, but looking at the big picture ultimately. I serve on the city's planning commission, and we do require, bioswales and things like that in new development that comes in. But a comprehensive view and system is ideal. And so I would recommend, I think you said that you're coming out with the study you've got the checklist coming out in August, but the green infrastructure solutions. I don't know if you've presented to the League of California Cities, but quite frequently planners from around the state go to the Planners Institute workshop, whatever they're calling it now. And that would be a good opportunity to talk to city planners about this and plant that idea for them about looking at all of the connections. It is a problem in government anyway where you have different entities working on different things from different angles, and sometimes it's duplicative. Sometimes it completely misses the mark because they don't see the big picture. So ideally we can get this kind of thing out to the rest of the planners in this state because it's an issue everywhere. It's an issue with the river too, where we have development that's coming up, creeping up toward the edge of the Santa Clara River, and you have buried bank stabilization, and that stabilizes the bank, but it doesn't necessarily allow infiltration, so we're reducing that infiltration. I always ask for, permeable paving wherever we can get it, and a lot of times that doesn't happen because it's hard to manage. And so, I'll be looking, too, for that codes and ordinances checklist. I think that's great. And again, if you can even get that to the League of California Cities, right off the bat and talk to them about being included in their presentations. That would be terrific.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a great venue. So I'd love to talk to you after the meeting. Maybe we can trade cards, and when that comes around, you can flag us and try to get us on the agenda. We'd be happy to do that.
I have one last comment, and that is that I personally would like to see a lot of the things that we've been talking about happen, but I also personally have a real problem with things becoming requirements, which then become unfunded mandates. I feel one way about it if you're talking about requiring new development to do a lot of these things, but when you're talking about existing residents and businesses, it's a whole nother ball of wax. So I really have a little bit of a problem with things becoming requirements as opposed to encouraging people to do, better water management on their own properties by some of the things that I mentioned, as opposed to making them requirements.
Yeah, from our perspective, the answer to this is all hands on deck. And the way that this is going to work we're not going to be able to build big things to solve this problem. We have to build lots of little things, and that's going to require everybody doing their piece. And that's going to have to be the solution, and it's going to have to take a while to get there.